Welcome to the show. Well, tonight, a reality check about the shocking, it's just unbelievable when you see this horrific video of how Hamas terrorists treated 5 19-year-old Jewish women. And this is when Labor is trying to act neutral in this war. The cowards. Although the Prime Minister today did have to row back a lot. It's embarrassing. I'll show you that too. Plus, Immigration Minister Andrew Giles shifts the blame for the release of a foreigner now accused of murder. But guess what? It's not actually Giles who should be sacked for this. He's the fall guy for his boss. I'll show you that too. Also tonight, Britain's Conservative Prime Minister calls an early election and claims there will be sunnier days ahead if people back this soggy leader who can't even check a weather forecast. Most disastrous election announcement I've ever seen. And the latest arranged attempt to destroy Donald Trump before the election. A new film showing him raping his former wife.
A scene so violent it drew audible gasps from the audience in Cannes.
And of course, my whiskey and my book of the week. This time the best, the most dangerous writer in France. The most honoured too, despite being put on trial for insulting Islam. Well, you'll see that he hasn't taken that lying down. But first, for heaven's sake, sack Chris Bowen while there's still a hope of saving Australia. It's Labor's great global warming scheme. It's a disaster, and even Labor now can't deny it. Its plan to destroy an electricity system that has worked with wind and solar that won't came to a screaming halt today, at least in New South Wales, where the government there signed a desperate deal to keep open the giant Eraring coal-fired plant for 2 more years when it was due to be scrapped next year. And the reason is simple. There's simply not enough green electricity to replace it.
It going out in 2025 is a major shock. It leads to reliability risks, which means potential blackouts, and it also would lead to a spike in prices.
Now, the deal that New South Wales government has come to with the power plant operators itself, it's not that important. Just know it's an underwriting deal that's probably going to cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. But the big point here is that wherever you now look, Labor's global warming obsession is destroying our reliable electricity supply and now also supplies of gas. And the days are coming when if you try to, put on the lights or turn on the heating, there'll be nothing. Now, we're shutting down the country, or Labor is, because of the most destructive public policy in our lifetimes. And the worst is that Labor is still refusing to grab hold of the one thing, or at least one of the things, that could still save us from some of the terrible consequences of its religious obsession, and that is nuclear power. Let's go back. It's now 17 years since Labor, under Kevin Rudd, decided to make global warming, climate change its new moral crusade.
Climate change is the great moral challenge of our generation.
And since then, Labor's global warming policies, and also the Liberal policies, because quite often because they were too scared to say no, helped to destroy 1/3 of our power stations, leaving us so short of electricity that the Australian Energy Market Operator warned of potential blackouts next summer in New South Wales and Victoria. Now, Victoria went even further. It even banned gas exploration on land for a decade. It still bans fracking. And we've just found out it has been sitting on warnings that it could run out of gas in 2 years. I mean, this is just insane. In fact, with electricity, AEMO, Australian Energy Market Operator, is now paying some manufacturers big money to actually shut down when electricity supplies are tight. Can you believe that? So you've got to ask yourself, which manufacturer needing a lot of electricity or gas or whatever is going to invest in this country? Opposition Leader Peter Dutton today was right.
Businesses won't remain in our country if there's a disruption to their power supply. There's 90% of the 24/7 baseload power that goes out of the system by 2034, and without gas and the ability to firm up with baseload power, we are going to have disruption and increased prices.
Now, it's not as if you're not seeing what's at stake. Already business failures in Australia have tripled over the past 2 years. Now, New South Wales Labor is seeing all this unfolding under its own watch now, which explains today's deal to keep its biggest coal-fired power station going for 2 years or even 4.
The latest analysis from the energy market operator says that we have reliability gaps coming to us from 2025 to 2027. We have to keep the lights on and prices down.
So this iceberg that the whole country is steering into is now so obvious that even Chris Bowen, the global warming extremist who's our federal energy and climate change minister, had to cheer New South Wales.
The Eraring power station should be open not a day longer than it should be and closed not a day earlier than it should. I think the New South Wales government has done a good job in negotiating that, ensuring that you have that energy in the system as we make that transition is, I think, appropriate.
So we're facing a real crisis, right? The green energy is simply not coming online like was promised. It just isn't, and it's costing a bomb more. But Chris Bowen still will not pull back. In fact, he's doubling down. He and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese are now spending billions and billions of your dollars on more harebrained green schemes, praying that they'll find one that will save us. Green hydrogen, proved at scale nowhere in the world. It's spending billions on that, hoping for this miracle green fuel to actually happen. There's another $1 billion to build solar panels here that's shared with the Queensland government, when there's already a glut of these panels in the world, thanks to China. And today, another crazy scheme, $500 million to persuade businesses to build batteries here as a backup for wind and solar plants. Build them in Australia.
It's a matter of supporting, in the initial stages, industries to grow. We haven't backed our own industries and our own people.
But here's the government splashing your money on batteries, in its vain attempt to find something, picking winners, when even its own Treasury Department says it doesn't make sense to invest in batteries when you can buy them much cheaper overseas. We're never going to compete. But the industry minister today reckons, well, these normal laws of economics don't apply to this government.
Both Treasury and the Productivity Commission have said Australia doesn't have the capacity to build a sustainable battery manufacturing industry. What's your response to their critique?
Well, a lot of it is orthodox thinking about just relying on our comparative advantage. And whenever anyone says that to you, it's about just maintaining the old dig and ship mentality.
It's like a government denying the existence of gravity. This is going to go horribly wrong. But the worst of it all is that this government still refuses to look at the one zero emissions technology we know does works already in 32 countries, and will provide electricity around the clock, 24/7. And that, of course, is nuclear power. And I ask you to try to explain this. Of the world's 20 largest economies, right, advanced economies, Australia is the only one that doesn't use nuclear power or doesn't want to, in fact, bans it. Australia. How does that work? We've got crippling prices, power prices. We've got shortages. The whole green energy project falling apart. With your electricity and your gas to your home no longer guaranteed in some parts. Here is a Labor government saying, well, despite all that, nuclear power must still be banned. Save Australia, sack Chris Bowen. But all these calls now to sack another Albanese government minister, the immigration minister, Andrew Giles, over its latest disaster. Look, I think his critics are missing the big picture here. Andrew Giles is just the scapegoat for Anthony Albanese. And why isn't the Prime Minister then under the griller for another terrible policy call? Proof coming up. Andrew Giles today did finally come out of witness protection to face the media and explain his role in an alleged murder. How was it that the Administrative Appeals Tribunal overturned a decision to throw out Emmanuel Saki, who's Sudanese, throw him out of the country, and letting him free instead to then allegedly murder Bosco Mignurano? Well, it's not my fault, said Andrew Giles today. He had wanted this alleged killer sent back to Sudan.
We very strongly argued against his visa, which was cancelled, being revoked. We argued very strongly for the grounds of community safety, which are at the highest priority of the ministerial direction and of our consideration of all of these matters. That was what we put to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal. The Tribunal made a different decision.
Except, as I showed last night, that's not the full story, because the Tribunal freed Emmanuel Saki after Giles in January issued a new directive saying don't be so quick to throw out foreign criminals if they've been in Australia for a long time, and Saki was exactly one of those. He'd been here since he was 12. The Tribunal noted exactly that, followed exactly what Giles had told it to, and released Saki despite his long criminal record, leaving the family of the man he's now allegedly killed stunned.
This could have been prevented. Definitely could have been prevented. Should have never happened. To wake up and find out the person was out in the public and has previous charges, not just in one state, another state, and he had just got released. I'm like, who this person is? Like, he should not be out in the public. Why would they even let somebody out like that with no restrictions?
So sack Giles, they say. But I ask you, whose idea was it really, this new rule, to avoid throwing out a foreign criminal if he's been here for years? Anthony Albanese. Do you remember when he became Prime Minister? He made a big deal about how the Liberals had upset our neighbours, that stupid Scott Morrison. In New Zealand's case, Morrison sending back Kiwi criminals who'd lived here for a long time, making Jacinda Ardern so very cross. So when Albanese met with New Zealand's worst ever Labor Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, then a media superstar, he gave her a make-up present, which is exactly this change, to let more foreign criminals stay in Australia if they've been here for ages. And Ardern said thank you.
But in my mind, yes, this does represent a reset.
It's like Australia has gone out of the naughty corner. We've been in the naughty corner for 9 years.
Australia's out of the naughty corner, but there's someone dead. So, why is Giles being flogged for a policy that Albanese wanted? Joining me is our Thursday regular, Nationals front bencher, Barnaby Joyce, the former Deputy Prime Minister. Barnaby, great to see you again. Look, the Prime Minister changed the policy to please New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern, and now an Australian is dead, allegedly as a consequence. Isn't this on him and not the Immigration Minister?
Well, it is, and I think it's very insightful, that piece. The naughty corner, unfortunately, the criminals are out of the naughty jail and they're walking the streets. And it seems like that the Prime Minister was the person who inspired this change. Now we get this eternal thing. It's nothing to do with us. It's like the Labor Party is just pining for opposition. They just want to be the opposition again. They were so good at being the opposition because they're an absolute fiasco of being the government, whether it's power, whether it's letting criminals just loose on the street. I mean, we see it, the costs of living, the whole thing, our defence force. I mean, it's a fiasco. And the number one clown at the fiasco circus, unfortunately, is the Prime Minister.
Well, sure, the ringmaster. This another thing that's really hit the fan, the Great Global Warming Scheme to get rid of coal and gas. Right. Now the New South Wales government, it's panicking. It's underwriting a coal-fired power plant, Eraring, to stay open for at least 2 more years. I believe the Victorian government is contemplating something similar there. I mean, doesn't this absolutely underline the need to at least consider drop the ban on nuclear power?
Well, it's not a religion, it's a cult. What we're having is this sort of cult-like approach. They run to the door and say, here are the pamphlets, the world is about to end. And if you don't agree with them, they go, denier, you're not a believer. And they run off to another house and knock on their door. But, we're seeing it. It's just that the reality is just screaming at us. If you close down Eraring, those lights will go out. It's very, very simple. It's like the person who tries to break their horse in to eat rocks. Eat rocks, eat rocks. And one day they say, I just about had the damn thing broken in, but it died. I mean, this lunacy, this loopy lunacy that intermittent power, swindle factories, solar factories, the countryside covered in a cobwebs of transmission lines, that Australia will run an economy on a windmill. I mean, if you want to see how it's going, Not one major manufacturer is making their way to Australia. They're all on their way out because they tell us what we want to hear. They say, look, they're kind of crazy in Australia. Just tell them whatever they want to hear. They're kind of loopy. And they say, oh, yes, great. You're going to save the planet, zero emissions by 2050. Rah, rah, off you go, you lunatic. And then they just leave us. And a rahing is now even the left are saying, oh, hang on. If we shut it down, the lights go out. Yeah, well done, Cyclone. Absolutely. 100% correct.
Isn't that incredible? That no one thought, oh, look, if you shut all these coal-fired power stations, we might not have enough power because we haven't figured a way to make all of the alternatives work. Barnaby, this was really embarrassing. Anthony Albanese today tried a desperate excuse, a desperate rowback on something he failed to do on Tuesday. On Tuesday, he refused to criticise or even comment on a decision by the Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to seek warrants for the arrest of Israel's Prime Minister for alleged war crimes, along with the leaders of Hamas, as if he was just another terrorist too. Now, a group of rabbis today were begging him to take a stand for once, and today he trotted out this excuse. He claimed he got asked an obtuse question on Tuesday and then falsely claimed we hadn't quoted all he'd said that day. Here he is.
I got asked an obtuse question yesterday or the day before, and today I'll make this point. What we've been very clear about, and I was clear about 2 days ago, didn't get a run in any of the quotes that we used, but I made it clear a couple of days ago, our opposition to what happened on October 7, once again, to the terrorist actions of Hamas. There is no equivalence between a terrorist organisation like Hamas. It should not be compared with any nation state.
Barnaby, that is so embarrassingly misleading, to put it mildly. I've checked everything Albanese said on the record on Tuesday. He never made that point about moral equivalence then. He's still not criticising the International Criminal Court now. He wouldn't even say today if Australia would or would not arrest Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, if the court did endorse the prosecutor's request for a warrant, or even whether we'd quit the body. Should we quit the International Criminal Court over this scandal?
Well, if this is the direction they're going, if they're going to create a democratically elected government and say that that is a criminal action, what are they saying? That the people who elected them partook in a criminal action to an elected democratic government? We keep on missing the number one fact here. Hamas is a terrorist organisation that on October the 7th in 2023 invaded a country, raped women, mutilated people, tore bodies apart, carted corpses around their streets, took hostages, and what you would expect would happen, there was the retaliation of the country that was invaded to stop this happening. Now, if Hamas wants the war to stop, surrender. That's how you stop war. Surrender and hand back the hostages. And yes, there'll be certain people who will have to absolutely and rightfully face the music. But this idea, oh, well, what we'll do is we'll say, well, because you defended your nation and retaliated against an absolutely barbaric act, Israel are criminals. The International Criminal Court are casting an aspersion against themselves, because if you sit back and think about it, if that happened to Australia, what would Australia want its armed forces, what would Australia want its government to do if we woke up one day and found out that in Sydney, women had been raped, babies mutilated, people just shot dead, murdered, hostages taken, they just charged in and invaded us. And if we said, yeah, we're going to deal with this, in the most dramatic and immediate way and without equivocation, and they say, oh, well, obviously the Australian Prime Minister's a criminal and should go to jail.
Yeah. Look, Barnaby, it's just sickening what I'm seeing. I said yesterday I don't recognise my country, particularly not under Anthony Albanese. I don't know what game he's playing, whether he's got ASIO telling him don't stir up.
He's weak, mate. It's really simple. He's weak. I don't think he's an anti-Semite. I don't think he's, to be honest, necessarily a bad person or anything like that. I don't think that. Politically I've got differences. But he's a weak man. He is very weak. And you can't have the leader of your nation being weak.
I think he's also playing it through a purely political spectrum. What will get me the votes? And I think one day you look back at your career and you'll think, I tried that for votes. Should be ashamed of myself. Barnaby Joyce, thank you so much indeed for your time. After the break, Britain goes to the polls after its Prime Minister makes the most disastrous election announcement I've ever seen. You've got to see it to believe it. I tell you what, this election is going to be so ugly. Now, if you know someone who's very anti-Israel, thinks it's overreacting, tell them to come to the TV in 5 minutes to watch what I've got to show, and let's see if they still think that after this. Meanwhile, I've seen the most disastrous election announcement ever. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak overnight called an early election, which is already a bizarre decision given the polls put his Conservative Party more than 20 points behind Labor. He's heading for a smashing. But worse, he said that voters should back the way that he's been managing stuff. At the same time, he's shown that he couldn't even manage to check the weather outside before holding a press conference out there without even an umbrella, while a protester there was playing at full blast a sort of a pro-Labor ditty, "Things can only get better."
Our economy is now growing faster than anyone predicted, outpacing Germany, France and the United States. And this morning it was confirmed that inflation is back to normal. This means that the pressure on prices will ease and mortgage rates will come down. This is proof that the plan and priorities I set out are working.
Well, the front pages let Sunak have it. You know, it can only get wetter and drown and out. Joining me from London's GB News presenter Patrick Christie's. Look, Patrick, I've got to say, what a stupid way to announce an election.
Absolutely appalling. The idea that they couldn't even organise an umbrella or a canopy or stop a bloke blaring a song at him whilst it was happening does not bode well for the quality of this Conservative campaign. But it is symptomatic of the kind of government, unfortunately, that we have had in recent history. He also chose to start his speech by reminding us all of that time the government locked us down for ages and smashed our economy to pieces with things like the furlough scheme. So that was an odd way to begin, but then things only got worse for the Prime Minister. Heavy rainfall. Things have actually got worse today as well, because it's emerged that the net migration numbers are out. They came out over here in the last half an hour or so. They are around 680,000 people a year in 2023. That is down from a record level of 760,000 people. Still astonishingly high, all of this under a Conservative government. There is one saving grace, though, Andrew. Nigel Farage, in the last hour, has announced that he will not be standing against the Conservatives at the next election. So Nigel Farage will not be doing that. The other question about all of this is the timing of this election, Andrew. We've got the Euros football, the Glastonbury Music Festival, school holidays up in Scotland, and crucially, I've had to cancel my honeymoon.
Oh, Patrick, I'm so sorry for you. I mean, that's bad luck. But let me take you back to the to Nigel Farage. He, of course, is the former Brexit leader. His Reform Party was hoping to make some gains, but I don't know. I don't think the polls were showing they'd win a single seat because it's winner take. You know, there's no preference swapping with your system. It's first past the post. Why would he rule himself out?
Well, I think, Andrew, the opportunity to go and earn quite a bit of money and, dare I say it, prestige following Donald Trump around America for the American election campaign is maybe a little bit more appealing than campaigning in wet and windy market towns in northern England. And so, therefore, I think Nigel Farage has made a decision that might not only suit his skin tan, his bank balance, but also maybe also his prestige in that sense. I think there is also a sense generally, Andrew, that let the Tories just suffer a massive kicking at the hands of Labour. Let Labour run this country into the ground for a couple of years. Everybody sees what a Labour government might actually look like. And then there could be the opportunity for some kind of re-emergence of a quotes-unquote truly Conservative party in Britain. I mean, that's a long game, isn't it? And unfortunately, we all have to suffer in order for that to happen. But maybe that is the best thing for the country in the long run.
So why did Rishi Sunak, with the polls as they are, right, saying, listen, Sunshine, you Sunshine, wet rat, you are going to be absolutely hammered if you go now, and it's gone now. Why?
Yeah. Look, the other breaking news about this last night was unbelievable, Andrew, which was that Conservative MPs last night, after he'd announced the election, tried to submit letters of no confidence in him to get him sacked to stop the election. It is a complete and utter farce. He's done it because, in his view, I think, he saw inflation was down to its lowest level for 3 years. I think he saw that other European countries are now trying to copy our Rwanda plan, which gives that a bit of a boost, doesn't it, really, in the face of Labour, who will reverse all of that. I think he just thought, look, this is, believe it or not, as good as it's going to get. The other very cynical aspect of all of this is that he's just had enough, actually. He's just had enough, and he thinks, you know what, let's just go to the country and put us all out of our misery. He could have gone for a longer campaign and let the Labour Party decide to eat itself apart. In the last week, the Labour Party has decided to make it easier to change gender, so that will be more blokes in women's changing rooms, and they've decided to make an enemy of Israel. So those are two things that the Conservative Party can hammer Labour with already. So we'll see what comes out.
Yes, we will indeed, but gee, the omens look terrible. But as that song was saying, as Rishi Sunak was standing wet in the rain, you know, things can only get better from there. But maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe he's going to prove us wrong there. Patrick Christie's, thank you so much for your time. After the break, something all those anti-Israel students out there attacking Israel, defending even Hamas, something they should see. Footage of 5 Israeli teenage women captured by Hamas. You watch this, you may understand exactly why Israel does have to fight. Okay, I want now to show you some video just released that should end so many lies and so much denial. But will it? Many anti-Israel protesters seem totally ignorant of the evil that Israel is confronting in this war in Gaza. They don't seem to understand why it's such a crime for our Prime Minister to wait a couple of days before saying, well, actually, there is no equivalence between the leader of Israel and the leaders of Hamas. We even have leaders of the student protest saying they support Hamas.
You've also got to send a message to Hamas to release the hostages, don't you?
Well, I actually say that Hamas deserve our unconditional support, not because I agree with their strategy.
You can't condemn what Hamas did in October last year?
I will not condemn what Hamas did. We must be unconditional, but we must be critical also,
Luke?
right?
No, I did not condemn.
Now, I'm not sure people like that are evil. I just think they're totally ignorant. So I hope that those people and the students chanting Hamas calls to destroy Israel from the river to the sea at least look at what I'm about to show you. And I hope you help them to get to see it. You know, share the YouTube clip or whatever. Now, caution. This is extremely confronting video. I show it for only 2 reasons. One, because the families of the teenage girls shown here, all of the girls are 19 years old, want you to see it. And 2, because it challenges those lies and those evasions. Now, this is the moment, this video is of the moment that Hamas terrorists on October 7 captured 5 teenagers, like I say, all women of the Israeli army, in a raid on they were spotters apparently. They killed, the Hamas terrorists killed about 60 soldiers there. They had these 5 girls and took them hostage. They are still hostages or dead, we don't know, 8 months later. And once again, a caution, very confronting. This is how those Hamas terrorists talk to and of these women, one of whom was later filmed, and I certainly won't show you this, with the crotch of her pants filled with blood. What?
Where from?
هاي السبهاي هاي الهمة no beautiful.
Joining me is the panel, James McPherson, Louise Elliott, business consultant and Hobart City Councillor. James is, of course, one of the hosts here on Sky News, doing terrific stuff too. James, seeing the reality, you know that so many people demonising Israel are simply ignorant. That's what I'm hoping. Or am I wrong?
I think, sadly, Andrew, you're wrong. I wish you were right, because ignorance can be overcome with education. But I think we've not got a problem of ignorance. We've got a problem of people who are blinded by a lust for power, or blinded by a warped ideology, or blinded by bloody hatred. Labor politicians are not ignorant. Anthony Albanese is not ignorant. Penny Wong isn't ignorant. Ed Husick isn't ignorant. They're simply blinded by a lust for power, where they honestly believe there's more votes in the Muslim community than in the Jewish community, hence their support for a two-state solution while hostages are still being held. When it comes to uni students, they're blinded by a warped ideology where they divide the whole world into oppressors and the oppressed, and it's beyond their comprehension to imagine Jews as being victims. It's not ignorance, it's ideology. And then we've got the problem of just bloody hatred, which unfortunately is rife in Australia. We saw right after October 7 people rejoicing at the attack on Jews on our own Sydney Opera House. We've had countless imams and preachers in Western Sydney celebrating and glorying in those attacks. So I wish that you were right. I wish it was ignorance, because then we could just educate people and they would see clearly. But you can't educate lust for power, warped ideology, or just bloody hatred. Those things are much more difficult to overcome, and that's the dilemma we've got.
Louise Elliott, what does that video tell you? Like I say, those 5 19-year-olds have not been seen since. One of them was filmed being, apparently with her ankle tendons slashed. I don't know what that means. Well, I think we can all guess. And the crotch of her pants filled with blood was being taken off a truck that had brought her to Gaza. What do you take from this video?
Yes, I watched the full length of that video this morning, actually, and you've definitely actually chosen, disturbingly, some of the milder scenes. The full video, for me, is one of those things that leaves a permanent imprint on your brain. You will never not see what you have seen. And from my perspective, a little bit of me, I guess, died inside, because you think this is not humans. These are rabid animals doing something and they've lost all of their humanity. And see those girls and just to try and, it's just unfathomable what I saw. And like I say, it makes me so sad, and it makes me even sadder that we have people who are unable, like James said, it's not really ignorance, they're almost, they're putting ignorance aside, they're determined not to see it, determined not to see the absolute horrors that have unfolded, determined not to see that Israel have no choice but to defend themselves and eradicate this persistent threat. And look what they had done to their people. I encourage people to have a look at it if you can, because the realities of what's happening we need to know about, and it needs to be shared.
Yes, I think I need to add one more piece to that picture. The commanders of those terrorists you saw have said, while Hamas is there, they will try to do this again and again and again to Israel. So while Hamas lives, this is their objective. James, as I showed earlier in the show, the Prime Minister came up with a bizarre excuse for not saying 2 days ago that the International Criminal Court was wrong, that no, the leaders of Israel and the leaders of Hamas were not birds of a feather. They were not morally equivalent. Just to repeat his excuse, here it is.
I got asked an obtuse question.
He wasn't, James, asked an obscure question. He was asked a very direct one. If he agreed with Joe Biden, the International Criminal Court decision was outrageous. What do you make of his leadership here?
Well, I wish I could make something of his leadership, but there's not much leadership to make anything of, Andrew. If it wasn't for the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, I don't think we'd have any leadership in this country. It's Peter Dutton who's provided leadership when it comes to anti-Semitism, when it comes to immigration, when it comes to the border, when it comes to crime and order, and on we could go. Anthony Albanese is looking more and more like someone whose sole objective was to get into power, and now he's there. His only objective is to retain power. So we've got a massive vacuum of leadership in this country, and it's showing. We've got chaos everywhere, and the problem is always leadership, and the solution is always leadership. The sooner we get a leader in the lodge, the better our country will be, because we sure as hell don't have a leader right now.
Louise Elliott?
I wholeheartedly agree with James. From my perspective, I've been around 40-odd years. About 20 of those I've cared about politics, and I can hand on heart say that Mr Albanese is the worst Prime Minister we've ever had, in my opinion. I'm prepared to give credit where credit's due, regardless of the political stripe, and I've been looking for opportunities to think, OK, he's stepped up and he's done a good job there. But to be honest, it's failure after failure, and they're getting more and more morally repugnant. He's pathetic, and I cannot wait till the next election.
I had a bit to do with Anthony Albanese before he became Labor leader, and I liked him. I still think he'd be a good bloke, but I'm so bitterly disappointed. James McPherson, Louise Elliott, thank you both for your time. After the break, when you think Trump haters couldn't get any lower, they make a film just premiered in the Cannes Film Festival showing Donald Trump raping his then wife. Plus my book of the week by a French genius who describes a France under a Muslim president. This man has guts. Every time you wonder how low the left can go to destroy Donald Trump, the answer is even lower. The left's hysteria, particularly from the media and showbiz, look, it is sick. There were already, the fake claims spread even by the FBI that Trump colluded with Russia to steal the election that made him president. Well, as you know now, totally false. Huge investigation, false. There are 4 criminal cases launched by Democrat prosecutors now to try to knock Trump out of the race before the November election. There's also now today a new film just premiered in Cannes, again to destroy Donald Trump.
It's the movie Donald Trump does not want you to see. It's called The Apprentice, and it's about Trump's rise to power in the 1980s.
Now, the big claim in this movie, the big money scene, is this. A scene so brutal that people in the audience even complained.
But the most disturbing scene is where Trump is portrayed raping Ivana, a scene so violent it drew audible gasps from the audience in Cannes.
In fact, Donald Trump denies there was any rape of his then wife, Ivana, and so did Ivana before her death. She actually said the story is totally without merit. On one occasion during 1989, Mr. Trump and I had marital relations in which he behaved very differently towards me than he had during our marriage. As a woman, I felt violated, as the love, the tenderness which he normally exhibited towards me was absent. I refer to this as rape. This was during a tense divorce where things get said. But I do not want my words to be interpreted in a literal or criminal sense. Joining me now is Sean Spicer, the first White House spokesman for Donald Trump as president. Sean Spicer, thank you for your time. What do you make of this film?
Well, from the little that I've seen of it, at least the anecdotes that have come out of the Cannes Film Festival, it sounds like another attempt to attack Donald Trump. It doesn't surprise me. Look, they've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at him since 2016, and the levels to which they sink, Andrew, never cease to amaze me. These false allegations that come up in this, and I get that they'll say that it's quasi-fictional, but they know exactly what they're doing. They're releasing this at a critical time in the U.S. election and trying to hurt him among women voters.
And what did you see of the relations between Donald Trump and his then wife, Ivana, or ex-wife, sorry?
Look, the times that I saw them interact were on the phone when he was president. She called a few times. That was it. It was always cordial. And from what I understand, they maintained a very cordial relationship. But as far as some of the accusations that they try to make in this film, the court record is clear as to what Mrs. Trump meant by what she said at the time. And the idea that these filmmakers are trying to twist a situation clearly to affect the outcome of the election is pretty pathetic.
They'd never make such a film about Barack Obama or something like that. I mean, it's just so
well. But I would just say
obvious.
not just Barack Obama, Andrew, but you think about these allegations that have come out against President Biden by a woman named Tara Reid. There's pretty disgusting allegations that have been leaked from his daughter Ashley's diary that they have substantiated as hers, and yet no one in the media will barely ask a question. Never mind validate the truthfulness that's in the diary of his own daughter. And yet here we go with another salacious attempt to smear Donald Trump. So it's actually one thing if there's a credible charge. In the case of Joe Biden, I mean, you mentioned Barack Obama, but in the case of Joe Biden, there's a lot of stuff out there that no one will even discuss. It's almost taboo to bring up the subjects, and yet they'll go out and sensationalize something in which they have an actual court record for when it comes to Donald Trump because they know that it'll sell.
Meanwhile, the one criminal case to go to court so far, a case against Donald Trump, seems to have exploded in the face of the prosecutors over the last few days. This was the claim, of course, that Donald Trump falsified bookwork by claiming payments as legal expenses when he was, in fact, allegedly paying hush money to porn star Stormy Daniels so she wouldn't talk about their alleged one-night affair. The payments allegedly went through Michael Cohen, his then lawyer and the prosecution's star witness. But Sean, relying on Cohen's evidence turns out to have been perhaps a big, big mistake.
Oh, absolutely. So 2 points on this. First, on the legal front. Look, this is a misdemeanor offense in the state of New York. Number one. Number two, the statute of limitations, how long you can charge someone for that crime, has well expired. This was something that occurred in 2015. So in a normal scenario, they wouldn't have been able to charge him. They're making it in what they consider to be furtherance of another crime. This is the thing that you need to understand, and every one of your viewers in Australia, they've yet to actually reveal in court what that crime is. So they're charging him with a misdemeanor. They're saying it'll ultimately end up a felony because it is combined with another charge. Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I've never heard of a scenario where they can charge you for something and not tell you what you're being charged for. Now let's get to your point about Michael Cohen, the prosecution's so-called star witness. There were two things that stood out to me this week. Number one, Cohen admitted under oath that he stole money from the Trump organization. Number two, his initial lawyer that he hired, he said, I never hired him before. Then the prosecution brings forward an email where Cohen says, welcome to my team. So he has had his credibility blown wide open. And that's the only thing that the prosecution has going for him. But keep in mind, if your star witness is a convicted perjurer, a convicted liar, and then gets caught lying more about their lies on the stand, I don't think that's a great place for the prosecution to be. The only thing that is saving this case for the prosecution is the fact that it's happening in Manhattan, New York, where 95% of the jury pool is Democrats. And I think the question is, does anybody on that jury pool think about following the law, or are they so eager to be part of an effort to get Donald Trump that they're going to throw the law aside? Because anybody who's taken, sixth grade classes would know that what the prosecution has presented doesn't amount to anything illegal.
No, I would think normally that'd be a case thrown out of court, even if it had made it in the first place. But still, but the funny thing is, Sean, despite everything thrown at Donald Trump, it just seems to get more popular. I mean, I've been seeing the crowds lining in the street to watch Trump go to and from the court. He's forced to go every day, get him off the campaign trail. But I have seen some polls lately saying, wait a minute, Joe Biden is now narrowing the gap. Trump was way ahead, but Joe Biden allegedly is now narrowing that gap. Is he?
In some states, sure. He's also, remember, we don't run national elections, so the media will love to flash these national polls saying, it was Trump 49, Biden 43, now it's 48, 44. But we don't run a national election. We run an election by states that have electoral votes. You need 270 to win in America. And right now, among what we call the battleground states, the 7 states that are really going to decide that amounts to about 94 electoral votes. Trump is leading in every single one of them. Now, Biden has closed the gap in a couple, but remember, Trump only needs to win a handful of them to become president again. That's the problem for Biden. They need to have a clean sweep of those, and they're not going to get it right now. But to your point, Andrew, and this is important, you showed those crowds, that the more that the prosecution and the Democrats and the media and Hollywood and corporate America go over the top to get this, it really strengthens the resolve of so many voters who might not have been with Donald Trump, but say, gosh, I don't like the system. I don't like the idea that the media and Hollywood and corporate America is trying to lock this election. They've done it again. Big tech did it last time by censoring certain, Hunter Biden's laptop and trying to skew search results and shadow ban other people. The reality is that the American people are tired of having these corporate overlords try to dictate who does better and who doesn't and put their finger on the scale. So I think you're seeing the result of that by more people saying, look, you guys have gone way over the top in your efforts to get Donald Trump. I remember what it was like under 4 years of him, and I know what's going on now.
Sean Spicer, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.
You bet, Andrew.
Well, this is actually my last day for 5 weeks. I'm off. So I felt quite called upon to leave you with a great whiskey and a great book to be getting on with. Now, the whiskey is about the loveliest peated whiskey, Lagavulin, 16 years, very smoky, yet really smooth. People are scared of very smoky whiskey. The sherry really comes through. It is perfect for winter. Brian Cox, you know him from Succession, the actor, the Scottish actor. He says it's the cognac of whiskies, and is right. As for the book, it's perfect for these times. Submission by Michelle Welbeck. I'm a huge fan of Michelle Welbeck. And as usual, you can go to the Robinson's Bookshop website where you'll find links to my book tips, including this one. They've got it on, they've ordered it in for you. Now, Welbeck, as I say, huge fan of his. He is France's most honoured, probably most successful literary author, despite being put on trial for insulting Islam. He actually won in the end. In this book, though, Submission, Welbeck doesn't insult Islam. He praises it, kind of. He imagines a Muslim president becoming the president of France and what follows next. And it all turns out quite all right for his main character. It's a French academic, one of the typical Welbeck characters. It's lost all zest for life, doesn't see any meaning in it, right? Likes mindless sex and all that. But he does appreciate how Islam puts men in charge of women. He loves the polygamy. It's a pity, of course, for his Jewish girlfriend. She's had to flee to Israel. But sucking up to the Muslim leadership has its rewards for him and his colleagues. I tell you what, you may not be surprised to hear this was a massive, massive bestseller in France and also in Germany. I don't think he's been all that promoted in Australia, which probably... It's not surprising given the publishing scene here. I mean, can you imagine an Australian author daring to write this? Can you imagine an Australian publisher daring to publish it? And I wonder how many bookshops actually promote Michelle Welbeck. But the good news is on Robinson's Bookshop website, you can find it. Well, I will be off to let you know one thing I'll be doing is another pilgrimage, Van Gogh, my great hero. Going to see his grave sites, I hope. What a great story it is. I must do a program on that one day. And also pay homage to Cardinal George Pell. Gee, don't you miss people like that? So cultured, sense of history, alas, gone. I'm going to see something to do with him. I'll tell you about it later. That's it from me. Goodbye. And from now, it's Sharry Markson.